Hi, welcome back. Okay, this lid, the bottom is almost ready, and we should be assembling within the next 30 minutes. So I just want to collect my thoughts. I'm going to go through and make sure that all of those joints are nice and clean before we put them together. And I finished off the bottom. I'm going to leave the rough texture right off of the scrub plane. I don't mind that at all. But the next thing I need to do is cut a rabbet all the way around that'll fit into that groove. So I'm going to, I've got a 1/4 inch mortise chisel, and that's the exact width. So I'm just going to use that just as a gauge, and I'm going to set my marking gauge for that 1/4 inch thickness. You guys got to make sure I keep my voice up so that they can hear. Okay, set that right on 1/4 inch. Lock it. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, I want to clean that bottom side up and just get rid of those pencil marks. But I'm going to put a quick edge on this plane because these are going to be my final passes. This is going to be the final finish. I'm not using any sandpaper on this, so I want an absolute pristine surface off of it. And if that means taking a couple seconds to sharpen the blade, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. These shouldn't be too bad because I flatten them after every use. It only takes a few seconds to bring them back in. Okay, set that down on the 1000. Find the primary, elevate a couple of degrees off of it. I mentioned one of the episodes back that I need to regrind this soon, so we'll make that a part of a future episode. I'm up a couple of degrees higher on this one than I was on the 1000 grit. 10 seconds of work, 3 seconds on one corner, 3 seconds on the opposite. Steel rule on the edge, apply the Charlesworth. As I mentioned, working pine, you usually have pitch on the back, so it takes a second or two to get rid of that. Make sure that's nice and dry. You see what I mean? See the size of the secondary bevel? It's too much metal to work, so I need to go in and regrind that. Okay, these are the chip breakers with the little tabs on the back, so that's why I had to assemble it that way. Normally I would cross it like a T, pull it back, move it over, slide it forward to protect the edge. Make sure there's no debris on the face of the frog. Set that in, make sure that the lateral adjustment lever, the yoke, everything makes proper contact. Sight down the sole. Get the blade parallel to the sole before I retract it. Now I'm pulling it all the way in. In particular, Jake, did you see my wax? You want to make sure that in this final stage where you're cleaning things up for the final time, that you start with the blade all the way retracted. So then I can slowly advance it until it picks up a shaving. If you don't, and you run the risk of having that blade out too far, then you go to take what you think is just a very final pass to dig in too deep. Now you've changed the dimension. So save yourself the grief. Pull a blade all the way in. Okay, this isn't going to sit perfectly flat because that's somewhat rough, so I'm just going to take a very, very light pass. As I mentioned, I just want to get rid of these pencil marks and leave a nice clean surface. This will be on the inside of the box. Wax on the sole. Now, while I'm planing, I'm going to advance the blade just a few minutes each time. Watch to see where the first shaving comes, and it's just about all the way across. Can you see that, Frick?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it out just a little more than that. I want to make sure your hands are nice and clean too, because I don't want to be leaving fingerprints on this pine. I got a little area right there that hasn't been touched yet, so I'll take another pass, just feel for where the overlap is. There. Alright, so that's nice and clean. Take my marking gauge. Hopefully that's not going to leave sometimes the brass will leave a black mark on light colored wood. So that's set for 1/4 inch. So I'm going to scribe a line all the way around. Roll as you get toward the edge so that you have a little more control. Okay. Didn't leave any marks. Alright, now, how much of a reveal do I want? That's going to sit in there, I think we decided almost 3/16 of an inch. So, the only thing to consider is that I don't want it too tight, because it's got to allow for this piece to expand and contract housed in those grooves. So I need to have a little more, or I need to have a certain amount of reveal, but I don't want too much. So I'm going to bring this back. I'm going to set it for about 3/16. Just barely over 3/16. I don't want to screw this up because it's hard to come back and do it a second time. So I'm just going to double check this and see what the depth is again. This is the bottom. Okay. Here's the problem. If you make it too close, it looks like a miss. And if you make it too far away, it just doesn't look like there was a lot of control involved. So I want just a nice, it's kind of hard to describe, but I want a nice even groove all the way around. And that is registering, as I say, just under 3/16 of an inch. And this is set to be just a little over. I think that'll be alright. I want a fairly heavy scribe here because I want it to prevent tear out when I use the skew block plane, particularly across the end of the board. Never any problem on the long grain, but coming across the end, I don't want a ragged edge. Okay. Now, skew block plane should be good and sharp, based on what it was like the last time I used it. Okay, do I cut the ends first or the long sides? I think I'm going to cut the ends first, and then I'll bring the long sides down. And I'm going to use one of these pieces to gauge it. I'll follow the line as close as possible, but then the final fit will be done using the actual groove. One of these fits one side the other better than the other, as you note. Okay, I've got this set up so that it's just sticking out beyond the edge of the bench, which means it's well supported. This, by the way, is where I like my other bench. It just doesn't leave any gap underneath the workpiece. Okay, that's projection. If you want to get that, Frick, I'll give you a white background to look at. Sight right down there so that they can see how much that blade is projecting. I got a shaving in there.
Let me see your camera. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Now I've got to set up the shoulder, or set up the fence, so that that blade is cutting right on the scribe line. Lock the fence in place. No, it's off a little bit. Lock the fence in place. Now, it's up to me. Because that's such a small piece that I'm moving, I've got to hold this plane level. Okay, I've got to remove about a fat 1/16. Okay, here's what I mean. I can't expect that little wee surface to keep, I can't even feel any registration of the plane. So to prevent it from tipping this way or this way, I kind of have to get a feel for when this plane is level. I'll also keep an eye down here, and I'll look on this side as well. And that one tells me that I need to tip in just a little bit more. Okay, I'm a little light here, a little heavy here, so I'll take a couple of passes where I don't go all the way across. I stop somewhere in the middle, then I'll continue it to about 3/4 of the way, and then I'll resume full length passes. I'm also going to watch to see where that little bevel from the marking gauge. You close enough, Rick? Can you see?
Yep.
Okay, it's close, but not quite there. You look right here. Can you zoom in on this?
Alright.
The marking gauge leaves a little bevel, and you can see the bevel right here is starting to show, but it hasn't shown over here yet. So I know I'm a little bit deep there, so instead of cutting back here, I'm going to start right about there. Take a cut and look. A little bit in the middle. Now I'll try that. Doesn't have to be a super snug fit, but I don't want it rattling around either. So. And I'll check every pass from here on in until I get it. And here's where you want a fairly light setting on the plane, because A, it allows you to sneak up with great precision, and B, you don't run the risk of breaking off a big chunk out here. I'm a little tight right in the middle, so I'm just going to come in here and take a couple light passes. This is the bottom. Okay. So that, wish I could get you to feel that through the camera, but you can't. However, I'll give you some idea what kind of a fit we're looking for. When that's in place, I didn't have to force it, and gravity won't allow it to drop out. So if it's too tight, you run the risk of spreading a piece, especially on this one where the pieces are fairly small, and you don't want to cause that to splay. And if it's too loose, like I said, it rattles around. You don't want that either. Keep an eye on that. Look here on the side, make sure that you're not canting in or out. Okay, I'm low here. Gotta get caught up on this end. Alright, let's check that. Ooh. Stop just in time. I'm going to take just a little bit right there. Okay, double check that. Right, that fits in. Now that's how much reveal we have, and I like that. And we'll complete that shoulder on the wrong sides. Make sure that's laying flat. Well, this one's easy because I can just watch where this piece interacts with that one, or intersects with these two rabbets that I already cut. You could use a shoulder plane to do this, but having that fence on there is so much easier. Okay, so I've got a nice fit right here. No ridge left, but I've got to remove a little more here. So just a smidge. Okay, now check that. Okay. There's the amount of reveal we have there. That fits. And do the other side. I've been trying to decide what to use for a finish on this, and I think I'm going to just wax it. And the reason I say that is because it's made out of pine, and I like the look that pine gets when it's handled. Wax will protect it a little bit from dirt and grease on your hands, but I don't want any kind of a top coat, and I really don't like what oil often does to pine. So I'm going to wax it instead. Not a real durable finish, but this is not a heavily used object. Okay, just watch this again. Light. Probably one pass more on this end, and go full length. Okay, no marks there. Pull that blade in just a little bit. Still a little bit of a ridge right there. Okay, now check this. Okay, that fits perfect. All right. Now, let's get a pre-assembly check. I want to go through and make sure that everything is exact. But I think before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and wax this. The reason is, it's easier to do now than after it's assembled. And it'll also prevent, if there's any glue that happens to squeeze in when we assemble this, it may lock this on the two corners and prevent that from expanding and contracting, and then you end up with either blowing out your joint or a split. So I'm going to go ahead and get some wax and put a coat on that. I don't really want to color it at all. Check this first on a scrap and see what it does. Okay, that doesn't impart any color. So I'll go ahead, do that. Nothing to having, it doesn't really take any time to dry. You can oil, you can spray, brush it on, do whatever you want. But like I said, for this project, considering what it is, I think a wax finish will allow that patina that is common on pine to occur a little faster than if you had a heavy top coat on there. Now this is where I want to protect the piece from accidentally getting glued in the glue up phase. Make sure I get the edges as well. Now I'm not going to wax the inside of the box, but I'm going to end up putting it on the bottom anyway, for that reason I mentioned, that I don't want any glue spilling over and causing this bottom to stick. But it shouldn't. It's got to be allowed to float. Alright, I'll set that aside for just a couple minutes, let it dry, and then I'll buff it off. Meantime, we can deal with getting this ready to assemble. Okay, first thing I want to check are these sockets. I want to make sure that everything is nice and clean. I'm going to put the light on. Jake, can you plug that in for me, please? I don't want to find any surprises after I've already got glue on this. And I can see some debris in there right now that needs to I need to get rid of. Can you find me a bulb that works? Should be one of those other lamps. You got enough light, Frick?
Yep.
Alright. See the debris right here?
Tilt it more towards me. Okay.
Okay, don't want that. Same thing in here. A little bit right there. I should have done all of this when I was working on this piece, but I suppose I could use the excuse of filming and all the stopping and starting. Okay, so that looks nice and clean. We already checked the back walls, and it's critical that that back wall be perpendicular to this bottom of the socket, or actually that's not really the case. What the back wall needs to be is perpendicular to outside here. It cannot slope this way. If it does, you put the joint together, it's going to cause it to spread. It can be slightly undercut, that's alright. You're not losing valuable glue surface because while that's long grain, the part going up against it is end grain, so no loss there. Double check this one. It's often that debris in the corner that you don't readily see. It causes the joint to kick open. Check this one. You guys excited?
Very.
Should have a drum roll or something. Okay, notice I'm choked up. I don't mean choked up, I mean I choked up on my chisel, so I have lots of control. Inside's clean, so I don't really need to take another pass on there. And I wouldn't want to have to, because if you do, you're going to change the dimension and you're going to make the fit loose. So hopefully that has been kept in good condition. That one is too. Now let's look at this one. Okay, the edges are all chamfered. No debris in those shoulders. Now I got to get rid of this material right here. See that little flap left over? That's a tough cut to make. Just because your saw only is only supported halfway through. Okay, check this one. Corners are nice and clean, no debris in there. There is here, just a little bit. Straight in, and remember, never pry. Make sure these corners are nice and clean. That one could use a little. See what I mean? Can you see what I'm looking at right here? Right in this corner? See that little bit of material hung on that side of that tail? So I'm going to go in there and just get the lamp just right. Working front to back. Very light pressure with the chisel. You know, this is where my students usually end up going too far. And they take a good joint and mess it up just by second guessing themselves. However, second guessing yourself and going back and checking to make sure that you did a good job. Two different things. Want to make sure the bottom of those sockets are clean. And if you need to, take a square, a small square, and reference off of the outside edge. Now, that square should touch on the inside as well. In other words, you don't want any bumps. You don't want any bumps in the middle. If that rocks at all, then you've got a problem. And you've got to go in there and clean that up, or else it'll prevent the joint from seating properly. Now, let's do a for instance. If we did have a little bit of material that was high in between those tails, here's what I would do. Starting on the inside, make sure, actually I'm going to use a narrow, I'm going to grab a 3/16 chisel, so I'm not quite so cramped. Okay, you want to come over here, Frick, on my right side. If I had, you thought I was going to say $1 million, didn't you? If I had a little too much material in there, in other words, it was a bump, I'd come in here, set my chisel just inside the joint, hold it firmly with my left hand, either pound slightly or push, head towards the middle. Actually, you know what, that could stand to have a little bit of a tune-up on the edge. The nice thing about having those stones there and always ready. Okay, so I come in here, reference just inside the joint, and purposely undercut toward the center, and then from the face side. And the reason we start on the inside and finish on the face side is there's resistance ahead of the chisel when I started. Now there isn't going to be, because I'm eventually going to break through, and if something were to happen that I went on through, at least I'd be damaging the inside, not the outside. Now, don't come out here, step just inside the joint a little bit, and then pare down until you meet in the middle, and now you've got the joint slightly undercut. It's not going to cause a problem at all, but it will prevent the joint from not closing the way it should. Okay, I think these pieces are all good to go. Let me know if I get in your way. Now, if you think I'm being extra cautious, I don't want to screw up 11 episodes. All right, now I got to buff that wax.
This is 13.
This is 13?
I think so.
Well, that's even worse.
This is the season finale, is it?
No, we still have to do the lid.
Okay.
How long? And I want to cover a couple of other little tool type issues.
You have 20 seconds.
You have 20 seconds
20
left.
seconds of oh shoot. All right, well, I'm not going to apologize for not getting it together in this episode, because you have to make sure that everything is right. You can't discover you forgot something, or things weren't cleaned up properly after you've already got glue on it. So, when we come back, episode number what?
I think 14 will be our...
Episode 14. I've been promising you this now for an awful long time, but episode 14 will assemble. So get the rest of that wax out of there. And be set to go. Alright, see you back here shortly.